Hello and welcome to week 2 and chapter 2. In this chapter we are trying to explain why foods cost what they do and then relate these costs to food choice. In a perfect world, we would all need 3 meals a day of organic, nutritious foods with great flavor that are cooked to perfection, but there tends to be a bit of a gap between this ideal and what actually winds up on our plates. This chapter expands on some of the topics of week 1 and further explains why we eat certain foods, while also touching on why foods cost what they do. You will have a better understanding of why a cup of ramen, which is filled with a variety of random and seemingly unnatural ingredients, can cost so much less than natural foods that are prepared with only a few basic ingredients. You will also learn why an apple that is purchased in Englewood, Chicago is generally significantly more expensive than an apple that you can buy in a grocery store in Orland Park, Illinois. For this chapter, understand the basic definition of food economics and be able to recognize the role of food ec in your personal food choices. Be able to identify different levels of food costs and availability in low-income and remote areas. Identify the characteristics of foods that are more available in low-income areas, and then also be able to define convenience foods and recognize their associated pros and cons. Our book defines economics as the efficient use of resources to achieve a desired goal. With regards to food, this means that we can use certain resources available to us to meet the goals that we can achieve from food. These goals are health, taste, and enjoyment. By recognizing all three of these, we set ourselves up to receive the greatest benefit from our food. Now, with that being said, note that if we emphasize one of these factors excessively and ignore another, we do not receive the full benefit that we can get from foods. So say if we emphasize nutrition and ignore enjoyment, there is a lower chance of developing chronic diseases, but this could also lead to social isolation and a variety of other associated problems. By emphasizing enjoyment and ignoring nutrition, we set ourselves up for a greater risk for chronic health conditions. Food establishments, especially the ones that are coming up and introducing themselves into the market today, they must understand that by providing a degree of nutrition, taste, and enjoyment, they will be providing the customer with an optimal level of satisfaction, and they are giving their business the greatest chance for achieving success. In order to have food that provides an optimal level of taste, nutrition, and enjoyment, we must understand which resources we have available to us and effectively make use of these resources. Given our knowledge and skills, we are going to use a certain degree of time, energy, and money to consume and purchase foods that are going to provide us, or the people that we are working for, with an optimal degree of health, taste, and enjoyment. So again, our priorities for foods are related to health, taste, and enjoyment. Now let's go back to this slide from week 1. What this shows us are the different levels of money that are spent by different income levels in the United States on food. People of lower income have less total money to spend on food, and even more noteworthy, they spend a greater portion of their total income on food. Because of this, they are much more likely to experience stress and pressure related to their food choices. Now, this additional stress and pressure leads people of lower income status to be generally more concerned with cost and convenience than anything else when it comes to food selection. Going back to the last slide, there is a much greater concern related to managing a problem, limited resources, than experiencing pleasure through health, taste, and enjoyment that goes on for people of lower income status because of these numbers that we see here. With that in mind, consider the long-term effect that this has on the desire to eat healthy foods and the effect this additional pressure has on other aspects of life. Let's go a little bit deeper into food cost. The cost of food is related to much more than what it provides the consumer. While demand for food does have an effect on price, there are many factors from a production standpoint that influence cost. Producing crops and raising livestock requires a great deal of energy, resources, and time. Then after this production occurs, food still has to be processed and packaged, requiring more resources, more time, more human labor, and more energy. To fully appreciate the price of foods that come from outside our own country, understand that the same food from a different country, regardless of the distance the food will travel, may have varying costs related to our trade policies with that country. Cost is also related to geographic location of where people live that are purchasing foods. A highly populated, easily accessible town will generally have lower food costs. Because of the high population, there will be a higher demand for food, leading to a greater quantity that can be shipped to these locations. If the location has a population with a high income, it is easier for healthier foods to be more available and sold at a more reasonable price because more people in this population will buy them. In a lower income area, there is a greater risk associated with sending healthier food options because there is a much lower demand for these foods. Therefore, whole and fresh foods, if available, will cost more in these locations. It is also a greater risk for food vendors to sell in mountainous, desert, or other remote locations, and therefore, it is generally also more difficult for food to reach these locations. So the cost of food in these more remote, harder to get to locations becomes significantly higher. The first factor that we will examine in greater depth related to food cost is food production. This involves raising basic foods and ingredients through crops and livestock being animals. Farmers require land to raise the food on, water and fertilizer to maintain the land. And then water and food is also required for livestock, and water by itself is necessary to produce plants. From there, the food is processed and packaged, and a significant amount of money is allocated for the labor of the people that have a hand in the food production. Now, you've seen this slide a few times before. You're probably getting used to what this means, but before going any further, make sure that you understand what this slide is saying. People of a lower socioeconomic status, while they have less money to spend on food, the money that they do have comprises a greater portion of total income. So what this means is that they have less money for food, and more of what they do have is being spent on food, leading to more pressure related to food choice. Now, this creates a great deal of stress related to food purchasing and promotes the purchasing of cheaper, more convenient foods. This slide primarily highlights the effect of socioeconomic status on food costs and also touches on the role of geography in food cost. People of lower socioeconomic status have more pressure related to food choices and have to focus more of their energy on meeting their basic needs. This means that they are looking for foods with a low cost and good taste. Food vendors meet the needs and demands of the populations that they serve simply in order to stay in business. Because low-income populations tend to eat more processed and convenient foods, food vendors set up their businesses to be profitable selling these types of foods. So there is a much lower incentive for grocery stores and restaurants to make healthier foods available for low-income populations, since those populations do not want those foods, generally speaking. The overall outcome is that fewer healthier foods are available and affordable. So you can see how this is a somewhat cyclical process. Processed and more convenient foods will still provide taste and enjoyment, and they provide nutrition to a certain degree. The nutritional focus of this population, however, is more so centered on foods that provide sufficient energy, meaning calories, vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. The other nutrients are often less important because they are less likely to meet immediate needs. So while they may not actually sit down and review the nutritional labels to make sure that each of these foods has plenty of calories, from a psychological standpoint, people from low socioeconomic status are more likely to choose these foods because they meet basic needs. This slide compares the food costs from restaurants to grocery stores. Restaurant foods, they cost more because there is more that is being provided. There are higher costs for labor, entertainment, environment, and overall service compared to most grocery stores. Grocery store prices are generally similar across the board, but the cost of the foods that they provide will vary based on the degree to which they emphasize each of the factors that are listed, as well as geographic location. Unfortunately, our main resources, which are time and energy, are things that are very, very limited. And regardless of how hard we push ourselves, we are only going to have so much of each of these. Now, we can use time and resources to gather and prepare certain foods, but in our culture and society, there's a lot of pressure on a fast-paced lifestyle and being involved in a lot of different things in our lives. So we have to take care of a lot of responsibilities. We try to do a lot of things. As a result, our time and energy are generally more so devoted to these types of things than they are to food preparation. So as a result, convenience foods can be very easy for us to prepare and have on hand for our meals. Convenience foods have a longer shelf life. And with the longer shelf life, they have a high demand. So the high demand allows for higher production. So there's more sales and therefore a lower cost to fresh foods that require few ingredients for their production. Think about something like bananas, oranges, any fruit, vegetables, any produce. You're talking about one ingredient, just that vegetable or just that fruit. With convenience foods, if you look on the back, they have anywhere from 5 to sometimes up to 30 different ingredients. And even though there's a variety of different ingredients that are required for their production, and also quite a bit of time and energy that goes into actually bringing those and mixing those together to create a desired flavor and texture, even with all that, those foods are often generally less expensive than the produce that has just the one ingredient that requires almost no preparation. Now, high production of high demand of these convenience foods allows businesses to make a lot of money from creating these products. So therefore, they have a lot of extra money, and with this money, these businesses can develop their product to improve its sensory features. This makes the public even more likely to purchase these foods, promoting the development of a cyclical process that can easily lead to long-term continued increases in demand for convenience foods.